So I thought I'd do something a bit different and rank the Disney Renaissance. I've recently got into rewatching Disney films and ended up watching the entire Renaissance for the first time. I'd seen about half the films growing up, but there were some I'd never seen before, and so I want to talk about them, briefly at least. I probably will talk about some of them in more depth at some point, but for the moment I kind of want to give my general thoughts on them and rank them. I was originally going to do this as a more off-the-cuff tier list video, but that didn't work out, and so we've ended up with something more heavily edited. But that's enough of an introduction, and let's get into the ranking. Now I'm going to be immediately controversial with my last place choice, as my least favourite film of the Renaissance is The Lion King, and I won't lie, I think it's a terrible film. There are several reasons for it, with my biggest two being it's tonally inconsistent, and I didn't find myself getting attached to the characters. This is one of the films I watched when I was younger and didn't even like it then, and on my rewatch that is just as true, but I just now understand why I don't like it. While I can't really explain why I didn't get attached to the characters, I can explain the tone problem, and that comes from the film's darker edge right up against the lighter comedic stuff. Notably how we go from Mufasa's death, Simba running away and Scar taking control, to Timon and Pumbaa singing happily and making fart jokes. This happens several times and it clashes, so I don't end up feeling the impact of the darker moments. There are also other problems I have with it. I'm not a big fan of Scar, and I do think he would have been stronger as a twist villain, entirely due to the scene where he kills Mufasa, because if that was the moment you first learned he was evil, then it would have been far more impactful than what we actually got, where right before it he sung a song about his plans to take over and to kill the king. I do like the soundtrack for the most part, although I don't enjoy it as a part of the actual film, and would prefer to just come across some of the songs while listening to Elton John. Although there are some which seem very badly mixed, with the lyrics being drowned out by the music. I will admit though, for all I don't like and its faults, I do like the first scene where the sun rises and all the animals surround Pride Rock. Basically everything up to when the characters speak, I like. Next up is The Rescuers Down Under. A lot of my problems with this one come from the fact that it's a sequel and its general placement as a Renaissance film, as it's definitely the most out of place in this era. I did watch the original before the sequel, as that seemed fair and quite enjoyed it. So when this film sidelined the original main characters for its other plot lines, it was very annoying. Despite that, I do like the plot line with the kid and the animals and the hunter though. It's quite comedic with some great emotional moments, but the limited screen time with the rescuers themselves was definitely the weak point of this film. The CGI has definitely aged, but it's still quite a sight to see in this film, and blends well with the newer animation type this film introduced to Disney. But I think this would have been better solely as a film about the kid and the hunter, rather than the Rescuers sequel. Pocahontas is next, and like with Lion King, my main problem was not getting attached to the characters, and I found it a bit short of the story it was telling, so perhaps another 10 minutes could have improved things. I did find there were a lot of quite beautiful wide shots which really gave me a sense of nostalgia for some of the Silver Age films. I unfortunately didn't find the soundtrack all that memorable, which is a first for a Menken score, but I have had the occasional song pop up in playlists and have enjoyed them. The next film is Hercules. Now we're getting into the ones I know well from when I was younger, but it's never really been a favourite of mine. I enjoyed the music and I'm a big fan of the gospel chorus. Plus it would be heresy to not say how great Hades is, one of the best villains in all of Disney. It's got a somewhat strong emotional core and a very distinctive art style, although I found there were too many cultural references and they kept breaking my immersion. While I don't mind references and do like them, there were just too many and they were a bit over the top here. Aladdin is next, and it's the first of these I really enjoy. While the villain is the one aspect I'm not the biggest fan of, as I find him a bit bland despite a great performance, almost everything else I think is great. The soundtrack is really strong, with it perhaps having Disney's greatest love song with A Whole New World. It's also got one of the few Disney romances that I actually believe, with the song really pushing it. Robin Williams is of course amazing, and while many of you would assume I'd hate the genie due to the constant pop culture references, I don't. And the reason for that is unlike Hercules, they feel natural, as a genie is basically just Robin Williams in animated form, and so they do end up being enjoyable through that lens. The next is Mulan, which I think actually ties with Aladdin. It's got a great main character who has a strong arc which also goes to the world itself. The music is really strong, with the choice to leave the songs behind in the second half making it unique. I do find Mushu a bit annoying though, and did find myself being a bit annoyed at the fact that he actually impacts the plot as a physical being, which did feel a bit odd for the type of character he was meant to be, but I can accept that due to his funnier moments. While very different, I do enjoy these two films the same, and I think which I prefer at any time comes down to, do I want something a bit more upbeat and fun, or darker with a stronger message? The Little Mermaid is in fourth place. As the first film of the Renaissance, it really ran with the Broadway show idea, and succeeds with it. Sebastian's songs especially feel like we're watching a live performance from an orchestra, while the plot is happening slightly in the background to it. The animation is also very unique for the Renaissance, as it was the only one to be traditionally animated, while the others were digital using the CAD system. At its little imperfections you only get with traditional animation give it an extra bit of character. Ursula is also a great villain, although not a favourite of mine, and I do also enjoy most of the characters in it. It was a perfect start to the Renaissance. Next is Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is probably the darkest a Disney film has ever gotten. While we do still have the upbeat songs of this era, most have a slight sadness or edge to them, which others lack, with Hellfire being so much darker than anything else in the film. It's not a perfect film. I really don't like the performer character, mostly due to his musical number when Quasimodo is captured, and it feels totally out of place with him about to be killed. Plus the gargoyles are a bit of an oddity. There is a sense that they're just in Quasimodo's head, but then they actually affect other people at times, but they are fun when on screen. I think Quasimodo himself is a great protagonist, and the story does a lot to make you bond with him. I'm also quite fond of the fact that it's not a romance story. While he does like Esmeralda, she doesn't like him in that way, but he learns to accept that as he is accepted by society. Second place goes to Tarzan. This is another film I have a lot of nostalgia for, and in fact when I rewatched all these films, I rewatched it on my original VHS copy, and so I can't comment on how good the sides of the frames are. It's got a very unique and distinctive score against the other films of the Renaissance, which I do really enjoy. There is a very strong emotional core within the story, as we see Tarzan grow up and see him trying desperately to gain the respect of Kerchak. Clayton is a great villain despite his limited screen time, and Kerchak is a great secondary antagonist, a more personal hurdle for Tarzan to conquer. The romance is also a strong one, as it feels more at the more believable ones due to the extreme nature of it, and I do tend to find in Disney films that generally the more extreme the situation is, the more believable the short time frame is, although this is definitely set over a far longer time frame than most. Just seeing the leap in quality from the CGI of Rescuers Down Under to this film is incredible, with it blending so well with the traditional 2D animation to give us some great fast moving action as the characters travel the jungle. Then in first place is obviously Beauty and the Beast. This is one of my favourite Disney films, it is up there as a favourite of all time for me. It's definitely the Disney film and perhaps film overall that I have the most nostalgia for. Everything about it is great. While the romance is perhaps a bit too fast to the point of it taking either 1 or 2 days for Belle and the Beast to fall in love, depending on the version you watch, it's still a strong one. The art style and animation is amazing, and I think it's the most beautiful of all Disney films. The score is amazing, and my favourite in all of Disney, with all of the songs being bangers in their own right. The one I like the least is definitely Human Again, but that's entirely due to a lack of nostalgia for it like the others, and it has grown on me a lot during my recent rewatches. Gaston is an excellent villain and a bit more down to earth than other villains of the Renaissance, which does make him more intimidating than others as he feels somewhat more real. This is definitely the film I'm most likely to cover in a review, as I have a lot I want to say about the film, but can't in this short format. So that's my ranking of the Disney Renaissance. A controversial start obviously, but that's just how I feel about that film. This is probably my favourite era of Disney animated films, with the only other era that is near it being the experimental era, which immediately followed it. I definitely want to talk about several of these films in more detail at some point, so we'll see what happens. Plus there's plenty of other eras to rank, perhaps the silver or experimental one next.